What we're going to look at in this tutorial is getting our line plot and then maybe the stations pulled into our map. And there are a couple of ways that you can do this, and you might have a better way out there to do it. I know originally what I would do is export from Compass a DXF file and then import it into Illustrator, which would bring in a whole vector line plot on layers and everything all set up. I didn't have to do anything after that other than sort stations a little bit. But unfortunately with Illustrator CS it doesn't seem to allow that, even though it does show when you go to place something that you could place a DXF, but when you go to do it, it says incorrect file format. At least that's happened when I've exported from Compass now. So my go around is one, I could take the sketches that I have here. You notice that the sketches I have a computer generated line plot on them. What I did, I mentioned earlier, is that I printed a line plot from Compass, and then using my original sketches from the cave, I overlaid the line plot on top of the sketches on a light box and then traced over so that I had a more accurate sketch of the cave. And then I just pull that into via a scanner, save it as a JPEG, pull it in as a JPEG, and then import it into Illustrator here. So I have a nice accurate line plot on my sketch. This would be a problem if the paper had been all warped and everything, because then that's going to distort my line plot. Another option that you have is, and one thing that I've tried in the past, is doing a screen capture from Compass of the line plot. So let me show you that. I actually have a screen capture here. I'm going to go to File and Place this external document, and let's see. So here is Oak City. Now the problem with the screen capture is, in order to view this whole thing, unfortunately I can't do it to scale. And so I'm going to need to scale it with my map that I have. So we've already learned how to change the opacity. I'm going to take that opacity down quite a bit. And then what I'm going to have to do, and this is a pain, and that is find these stations here. So there is, let's see, if I zoom in close. So you can see there's A12, A13, but this is definitely not to scale. So this is where it becomes a little more painful. I'm going to have to zoom out and expand this out. So let's see, it looks like there's my initial station. Drag that out. Let's take this, let's move it over. And in order to change the scale, I grab these handlebars here, these corner handlebars, not the middle one, because the middle one will distort the proportions, you see. So I grab the handlebars, and one important thing to do is hold the Shift key down. That constrains the proportions. If I don't hold the Shift key down, watch what happens. See, we don't want that to happen. So hold the Shift key, so hold Shift, click, drag, let it go of the mouse, let it go of the Shift key. Do it in that order. That will scale it. So I need to scale it to be exactly the way it needs to be. Okay, let's see, that looks like it's a little too big. So you can see this can be quite tedious, but in the end you should have a fairly accurate line plot. Okay, I think we need to go a little bit smaller now. Let's move this over, and looks like we're just about there. I'm going to zoom in, and looks like we need to go a little bit bigger. Okay, let's move over here. Too big. So yeah, you can see this would take a while. But now it looks like I have just about got it. Right. We'll call that good enough. Alright, so that's another way you could do it. Exporting a screenshot and then stretching it out so that it matches up with your notes. I'm going to zoom out, and what I'm going to do now, let's move over here and expand this out. And let's turn off this image layer. Okay, so you've somehow got to get an accurate line plot in there, an image of the line plot somehow. Once you have that in, whether it's via your map like I've done here, or you've pulled in a screen capture, now we need to go and trace over that. One thing that I don't want to do is accidentally draw on my survey notes layer. So I'm going to lock it. So with that locked, now if I try to click and drag, you notice I can't grab these anymore. They're locked and they won't move. If I try to draw on the layer, so I'm going to come over here and grab this tool. Let's come back, and notice it has a pencil with a line drawn through it. I can't draw because the layer's locked. So I can't make any changes to this layer at that point. which is perfect. That's what I want. What I do want to do, if I move back over here, is make changes to the line plot layer. And what better tool to use for line plots than the line tool? So let's move back over here and find your line tool. So mine is up just a little bit. There we go. A line tool, the single line tool. And to create a line, all I do is click, drag, let it go, and there's my line. Now, if I go to grab this line, it's disappeared. The reason why is because right now, let's expand my palette up. Notice I have no fill, I have no strokes, so I can't see a line. This line has no bulk to it at all. So I'm just going to click the default button there, the black and white, and now it has a black stroke. Default is 1 point. I'm going to delete that. So it should have inherited that now with the line tool. If I grab the line tool and draw another line now, it inherits that black and white. But I want to change that. I think I want to make my lines blue, maybe a light blue. So I'm going to double click on the stroke, open the color picker, let's move this down to blue, and let's make it a light blue so it just barely shows up. Good. And then for the size, I'm going to make it a thin line, so 0.5. Oops, you can't see that. Let's try that again. There we go. So I'm going to make it a thin line. I'll click on the properties. I have the line tool selected, the properties, 0.5. 0.25, let's go even thinner. All right, and now let's go ahead and zoom in and start tracing our line plot. So I can barely see the line there. Make sure that you're on the right layer. I'm going to double check that. Yep, I'm on the line plot layer. Let's come back over here. Zoom in, that's close enough. And now I'm going to click and drag. Okay. I'm going to click and drag. Click and drag. So I'm just tracing over from station to station. Click and oh. Alright, I made a mistake now. Let's see what happened. So somehow this bumped around. If I want to make an adjustment to a line, if I want to move these individual points, I grab the white arrow, the direct selection arrow, and I'm going to click off and then try to grab right on the tip of that line. And now I can grab that point and drag it over here. I'm going to move over, grab this, and drag it over. Now, the way that I'm moving while I'm drawing here, there's a keyboard shortcut. As long as I hold the space bar down, this temporary keyboard shortcut, it turns it into the hand tool, and it allows me to pan around. So click and drag to pan. And then I can continue on. So let's get back to drawing our line plot. Hold down the space bar to click and drag. Click. Drag over with the line tool. Hold the space bar down to move. Click and drag all the way over. I can't actually get there, so I'm going to let it go of the line at that point. Come over here, grab the white arrow tool, grab that tip, move it. If I can't quite get the tip, I can click and drag and then move it over. And so you just continue that way. Now, ooh, what did I do? Oh yes, sometimes if you don't quite get right on the point and you accidentally grab the line, you'll end up dragging the entire line and not just that end point. And that's what I did. So I'm going to come back over here, click off of it, click and drag to select that end point, and then drag it over. Now, the great thing is that because I've been doing this on its own layer, when I come over here, so let's unlock and move over. I'm going to move this line plot over. When I now turn off the survey notes layer, notice that I'm left with a nice line plot here, because it's on its own layer. So that's the beauty of layers. So I'll just go through and continue with that. You can do that on your own time. Now let's add the stations here. So I'm going to lock the line plot layer, and this time I'm going to click on stations to edit it. And we're going to need the type tool. So I'm going to come over here and grab the type tool. And for the type tool, there are two ways to use it. If I click once, I create a single line of font of type. So I'm going to grab the move tool and delete that. If I click and drag, I create a text box. And now if I type, text wraps. For stations, I just need a single line. So I'm going to click, grab the type tool, click once, type A1. Great. And you select it just like you would in any word processing application. Click and drag. I've selected the text. And to change its properties, where do you think we do that? Well, it's in the properties bar. So I can change the font right here. Let's try something wild, or something not so wild. Let's change the size. I can change the size here, and I can change the color in the color palette. Double click right there, and let's make it bright red. Okay. So as long as I've selected the type, I can click here and change the color. Okay, another thing that I can do, I've moved from the type tool to the selection tool. I can now move this wherever I want. I can hover over the corner. I've got the corner handlebar and drag. Now remember, holding that shift key down to constrain the proportions. And I will move that down to station A1. If I want to duplicate this, I'll show you a really cool keyboard shortcut. As long as I hold the Alt key down and then I grab, notice when I hold the Alt key and hover over, I get that little white arrow. That means it's going to drag a duplicate. So if I click and drag at this point, I've just duplicated that station, and then I'll double click, or I'll grab my type tool now, come over here and select and change that to A2. Grab my black arrow, hold the Alt key down, drag over. Keyboard shortcuts are nice because we don't have to go through as many steps. Change that to 3. Grab this, hold the Alt key down, drag over, double click, change that to A4, and now I've got stations. So let's look at the layers palette again. I'm going to separate it and bring it over here. So I now have several different layers. I can turn off my survey notes, I can turn off my line plot, and now I'm just left with stations. So that's the beauty of these layers. And I'll go through and fine-tune this, maybe nudge these over to a better spot. Maybe I'll want to keep that over here. And if I wanted to, I could have station names and then stations and add little circles for each individual station. That might be kind of cool. Completely up to you. But that is how you go about adding line plots and stations.